I want them to know their business. I want them to understand their limits and their capabilities, where they fit in. Obviously, I help with a lot of brand positioning work and things like that, but I never want someone to come to me to fix their business. I want somebody who understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. Everything else we can do, but I can never tell you someone why they're doing their business. If they don't have a strong vision for it, then that's the one thing marketing, all the pretty copy and great videos out there in the world, they would be nothing if there was not a bigger mission or vision being tied to that.
The Business Owner's Journey. I'm Nick Berry, and I've got real business owners telling their real stories, sharing their real lessons and strategies, so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. So first thing, before I forget to do this again, I need to remind you, if you haven't already subscribed to the Business Owner's Journey on your favorite podcasting platform, right now would be a fantastic time for you to do that, before you forget. Now for today's guest, Dana Farber is the founder of Moonstone Marketing. She is a former CMO turned founder and owner. And Dana was introduced to me by Matt Goebel, who is a previous guest of the show also. Dana and I had a great conversation. You're going to know by the end of it what she's doing differently. And I think it gives you a great idea what you should expect from someone who's going to do your marketing for you. She talks about what she calls mindful marketing, getting totally immersed with the audience and understanding not just the audience where they're at, but also you, the owner, and what's going on in your head to make sure that she can reconcile those things. She also takes me through an exercise. We go back through a purchase that I've made and kind of unpack all of the different touch points. And she explains how that's shaping my perspective as a prospect and then a buyer. I think you'll find it very interesting. She does a fantastic job. Make sure you give her and Moonstone Marketing a follow also. Everything's in the show notes. How did you get here with Moonstone?
Yeah, so I am kind of non-traditionally trained in marketing, but have worked in marketing for my entire career. So I started at a PR agency and eventually ran the social media department there. And then I transitioned over to one of our clients, which was a boutique fitness franchise based in the Midwest. I'm from Chicago. And I loved their mission. It was all about empowering women. And I loved what they stood for. I had no experience with franchising, but I ended up jumping over there after my agency job and was then in the world of fitness, boutique fitness franchising specifically for nearly a decade, which is, just its own beast. Franchising is a really interesting industry. And it's kind of one of those things very insular. If you know, you know. It's challenging. It comes with its own unique challenges, but I've kind of always said if you can do franchising, you can do anything, because it is probably any issue or surprise that can happen in business, it's going to happen in franchising. So there's not much that can shock and scare me now.
I mean, anytime you're going to try to control as much as you're trying to control the franchise system,
will just not. Yeah, it's just it's a constant battle, but it's also very exciting, and I think it was a great battleground to kind of learn how to run a business and how to be on both sides of that equation, how to be a business owner, but also how to work with and speak to business owners of all different backgrounds, all different ages and demos. I mean, there's no one size fits all for franchising. So you really talk to all kinds of stakeholders. And at an early age, young in my career, I was able to have those conversations and just kind of gain that confidence in talking to people who were putting their life on the line for a business that I was selling them to buy. So there's a lot of stake in the game for me there. So I ended my career in franchising at Exponential Fitness in California. I was moved out there. I liked California, but I ended up not being a California girl, wanted to move back to the Midwest. And with all that confidence that I took with me from being in franchising for a while, I thought, why not me? During the pandemic, everyone's kind of starting their own business, and I thought that looked great. I had the support of my family to
everybody's doing it.
And, yeah, everybody's doing it. It's either this or make sourdough bread, and I chose to start a business as my pandemic project. And so kind of as they say, the rest is history. It's been 3 years almost since I started Moonstone. And I've never looked back once. I've never regretted the decision to start my own business.
That's awesome. Did you, so at what point did you start thinking about going into business for yourself? Or is that always something, did you kind of know that was going to be the end game?
I did and I didn't. It was somewhere in the back of my mind, but I always saw it as something collaborative that I would do with other people, that maybe we would start an agency together or I would start a business with someone. I really never thought of doing it myself. But again, we spent a ton of alone time during the pandemic. And I realized, through the echo chamber of my own apartment, I was like, well, you've got some great ideas. So I became kind of my own hype woman. And it's owning a business by yourself. It can get really lonely. And I'd say that's probably like the trade off of not doing it with a partner is, you don't have to run decisions by anyone, but also you don't really have a sounding board to bounce ideas off of. I don't have an executive board. It's my friends and family and the people that I trust with helping to advise my business. So no, it wasn't always something I thought of, but it is a very natural fit for my skill set because I'm hyper organized. I'm able to do multiple things at once and kind of focus where I need to focus and understand the larger implications of certain activities. So I think that my holistic viewpoint of marketing has benefited me to be an agency owner uniquely. So I think I'm very lucky in that the thing I really enjoy doing is also something that I'm just pretty good at.
Yeah, agreed. I think that you are too. So were you in California during the pandemic, or had you already moved back?
I was in California during the pandemic and I had just gotten there about 6 months before the pandemic. So in that, a totally new place, a totally new group of humans. I was away from my family for the first time in years. I, stayed in the Midwest for school, was always kind of pretty close to home. So that was a challenge in many ways. But also, I think it just kind of forced me to grow up a little and forced me to stand on my own 2 feet with everything. So I was in California during the pandemic. Basically, the entire time I was there was COVID. And when I moved back, it was 2021. So it was just like, people starting to get out of it. So yeah, I'm very grateful I was not in Chicago during the pandemic. I think being in the city would have been a little much for me, but yeah, it was kind of in this foreign land where I didn't know too many people.
Yeah, yeah. It's California's a foreign land anyway.
Yes,
So,
exactly. I
um,
love it. No shame to California and the people who love it, and I absolutely love to visit. I have a lot of friends that live there, but yeah, there's something about the Midwest that really just stuck with me, and I was like, it's if you like where you're from, you're pretty lucky, and you can stay there.
yep, agreed. So, okay, and so now you can tell me the story about when you were moving and whatever happened. All I know is it was a big deal.
Yeah, so the this is I mean I think I don't share the story very often just because it's one of those I don't look back on the time fondly, but at the same time I think it's one of those things where if something's going to happen, of course it's going to happen the day you start your business. And so this was, I had given my notice at Exponential. My boss had been very supportive of it. Actually, everyone knew I was starting my own business when I left, so there was no kind of dicey, exit. It was very open and it made sense for me and everyone agreed. And yeah, I was excited to move back to Chicago. So with a cross country move, you put your stuff in, God's hands, basically. You put it in a moving truck and you hope it's there on the other side. And I've always been a fairly like frightful person of thinking that the worst is always going to happen. But the very same week that I officially stopped, working at my full-time job and started on my own. My first week, I had 2 client calls set up. I was very lucky in that I was able to get clients before I actually started the business. So that was just very lucky. 2 client calls the next day, I get a phone call from the moving company that your shipment has been lost. There was a fire, there was electrical fire, the truck is in flames, you no longer own anything. I mean, and it was everything. It was like, material things, of course, but everything I'd ever owned, piece of clothing, photos, sentimental items. I'm very big into vintage and antiques, so things that are, not very replaceable. And all the material things aside, I think the biggest shock was just like, I'm starting a business tomorrow and I don't own pants. Like, I remember saying that to my parents, just being like, I don't know, I don't have I don't own pants. Like, I'm so confused where like my life is heading right now because I am starting this business tomorrow officially, and I have to simultaneously replace everything I own before I move back to Chicago in a week. So it was very frightening at the time, but also I think I kind of developed a sense of humor about it, and my early clients did too because they were so in shock also that this was happening to me, that it kind of just bonded us from the quick that like, wow, she's human, this stuff happens. Everyone was very nice. I got a lot of brand swag that first couple weeks from clients of being like, you might need this more than I do. And all's well that ends well. I eventually replaced my stuff, and it's now I don't look back on it as traumatic as it was at the time, but I think the timing of it is just, I think it's just the universe has a way of testing your limits, and it's all about how you respond in the moment. And the fact that I didn't crumble and just kind of took it as like, well, good thing I have something else I can focus on right now. And I compartmentalized it as much as I could and still built my business. It's something now I can look back and be pretty proud of that moment. And, very, very early on in my entrepreneur journey.
Yeah. Well, I think so. The reason that I wanted to ask you about it is because of your perspective. In a message to me, you'd said, it's important for me to recognize that you can only control what you can control. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Mm-hmm.
so much of this stuff that's out of your control. So the way you respond is the most important thing. And I mean, I agree. You would like to learn that lesson or be able to share that lesson,
Yes.
having gone through simpler things than losing
Right.
everything in a fire,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but at the same time, it's now when a client says, when something catastrophic happens, there is a level of relatability and empathy that I
Hmm.
understand there, that and at the end of the day, the reason I started my agency was not, necessarily to make money. I mean, obviously that is the reason I work, but I saw an opportunity, especially we're in franchising, that there's a level of humanity to building a business that sometimes gets lost in the process. And I wanted to make sure that when I was on the other side of the equation, that it would never get lost. And that the person that starts the business and their business are one and the same, and they should be treated with the same level of respect and just kind of connection that, I think I love marketing. I love marketers of all shapes and sizes, but I think that it tends to become a very big numbers game, and you just start to lose sight of the why behind things. So I always try to bring myself back to that when from client work to just client interactions, I think it's incredibly important to treat everyone as a human first and realize that so much of it again can get lost through Slack and email and text and all the ways that we communicate nowadays, that it's really important for me to get on calls with my clients, to look them in the eye, to be able to have a really open and candid, transparent relationship with them. And I think it's something they value as well, to kind of have this outside stakeholder that cares a lot about their business, even though I
Hmm.
really don't have a stake in it other than as a partner. So it's really benefited me, I think, to go through certain experiences. And again, by no means am I saying that's the worst thing that could happen to anyone, but I think it just helps bond people together and look beyond the traditional KPIs we track for relationship success.
Yeah. And it may not be the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody, but maybe it's able to help shape the way that you view things without you having to go through something worse. Right. It's
Yes,
like, okay,
absolutely, absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
plenty of a
like come
lesson
on,
for me.
got the test. Thank you. We did it. We're good.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that I don't want to understate that, because like the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because having seen some of your work with Matt and then gotten to know you a little bit, like there's something different about your message, your work, like it comes through. And I have an idea of where that comes from now, but that's what I want you to share. Like, it's just like I talked to you about with Roland, where
Hmm.
I read some of his work and I was like, okay, that shit's good. That's
Yes,
different, right?
it
And
is.
and the same thing with yours, with Matt and with Woven. It's like, okay, that's different. Everybody, marketers and everybody else. So we all talk about like relationships and how important all that is,
Hmm. Hmm.
but not many people say what you just said about like, I need to have a conversation. I need to like see their face. You didn't use these words, but like, I'm losing sleep over their business
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
they are. Right.
100%.
Yeah. And so, and I think that probably, like, it's not an accident that you're reading some of the things that were putting out got my attention. So now, all of that said, that's what I want to ask you, like, from your perspective, what's different about about your work? Why does your work jump out to me?
Well, first, I really appreciate those kind words, and to be in such illustrious, same, audience as them. But I would say, and it's something I kind of realized early in my career was a little different than just I always wanted to take a beat and dive a little bit deeper. Even when I was working in social media and just getting, used to agency life, I was always the last person to stay at a client meeting, and I would always try to have a deeper conversation, or something would resonate during that meeting and I'd want to ask further questions. I think my natural curiosity behind understanding what makes people tick and why they make certain decisions, which I'm just like a natural curious, like I've always just been that way. Like I ask a lot of questions and I'm probably like, it's a lot for people. But I'm curious. I want to know why they do certain things or why they made a decision. It's fascinating to me. And I think that there is so much to be learned, especially like the way I always like to think about adopting a brand. When I sign a new client and I'm now going to be running their social channels or their email marketing or whatever I'm running, it requires so much trust from a person who has built a brand to now relinquish that control over to me and say, okay, now you're going to be leading control of messaging. And I pride myself on the fact that after about a month or two, my clients stop going through approval processes. They completely hand over the process to me. And it's not something that I fight for. I'm happy to do approvals, but they don't want to. And it's because I get deep in their heads. I try to ask every possible question. I try to understand, and I try to, like, in a non creepy way, talk like them, think like them. When I'm running their accounts, when I'm running people's accounts, when I'm doing their brand work for them, I almost like adopt, in a Patrick Bateman way, like a different personality. And it's how I've always worked used to run 8 different social media clients accounts at the same time. The only way my brain worked was to kind of turn on and turn off different voices. And the only way for me to do that is to really understand my clients and what they want, and what they are not just telling me what they want, what they really want. And a lot of that comes just from, working with them longer, but also I ask them a lot of questions. I want to know why they do what they do, why they started their business, and not just because so I can write pretty copy, but so that I can actually get into the psychology of what they're trying to achieve with their business. Because every client's going to come to you and say, I want more leads, I want to make money, I want to sell. Of course, those are the goals that any entrepreneur are going to have. But there's always a deeper goal somewhere. And I think that is my job, and any marketer's job, is to really uncover why did you start a business? What do you really want out of this? Is it to help people? Is it to, retire at 40? There is some deeper root, even, non-financial ones. And to me, that is the make or break of selling and marketing a brand. So if my work has resonated at all, I think it's because I really try to think a level deeper. I call it mindful marketing. That's kind of the term I've coined around my process and my just perspective on the industry. But again, it's something that's resonated with my clients, and I think it early on they can see it's different working with me. I'm not just asking the same 4 questions over and over and doing rudimentary check-ins. I really genuinely want to know the answers, and not just for work, for myself, to work with them.
Yeah. So it's what I'm hearing is like, you want to understand the motivation and the thought process, and then use that to inform your work. And to contrast that to a lot of the experiences that people have, that we see, it's like we typically get asked the same 3 or 4 questions, answers are taken at face value, and then the output is basically a different version of the stuff that is already out there that everybody's doing.
Exactly. And I think that's why marketing has gotten almost a bad rap over the last few years, in that people do not focus on it as, and I know a recent guest of yours had talked about marketing as a process. And I think that's so important. It's such an important distinction because marketing is a process. It is the most important process, one of the most important processes you can put into your business.
Mm-hmm.
And because people have always treated it as an ancillary add-on, that, that's the way that it's like a cycle. You treat marketing like it doesn't matter, you're going to get marketing that doesn't matter. If you treat marketing as an extension of your brand that lives and breathes as your brand lives and breathes, it becomes absolutely tied to the success of your business, and they become indistinguishable from one another.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish that all founders, like my hope for my business is to, and I had Matt write this wonderful testimonial. I did not put these words into his mouth, but he had said that he's a skeptic, and I have kind of like started to break some of that skepticism.
I knew that was his. I knew it was his.
Yeah, that was his. And like, he is a skeptic, and that is to me like
Mm-hmm.
the biggest accomplishment I could get in my job. And I don't even know if I knew that until I saw that testimonial, but I said, that is what I want to do. I want people who have maybe always thought marketing doesn't work, or I just don't get marketing, or I don't think it's that important. I want them to work with me and understand why it's so important, and not just that it's important, but why it's important. I want them to understand the why the same way they want me to understand their why. Like it's a
Yep.
handoff, and it becomes a relationship. And that's why I've been really lucky that I've had clients that have stayed for 2, 3, 4 years with me, because that trust is built, that relationship is built. And so as they scale and grow their business, I'm just a part of that equation now, which is just so flattering.
Yeah. Well, I think, listening to you talk about it, and I think it was John Jantz was one of the people who said marketing is a process. Roland is big on like he's kind of got his process, but you guys you're craftsmen, right? It's not a hobby, and it's not something that that is purely an art form that you're just gonna go and do a thing and come back with, like, not gonna exploit the nebulousness of it being a creative endeavor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think as a business owner, that's like very appreciated, right? Because I know, I can speak for me, I know what Matt Goebel thinks about it. It's like, I'm going to trust somebody to be my voice here, and they need to understand what I'm thinking and how I want this to be conveyed. That's what got my attention when I saw some of the work that you've done with them. So you do B2B and B2C, right?
Correct. Yes, I do both.
Okay, tell me about like the clients that you're looking for. Like,
it's a great question. It's always a moving target, because I never want to have someone say, "Oh, that's not me, I can't work with her," because I love working with brands of all different levels, shapes, and sizes. But I would say that if I'm gonna, I think that I do have a sweet spot for any kind of multi-location brand. Due to franchising, I just understand the model of having different levels to your business, having different key stakeholders. It's an area I find really interesting and exciting. So I do have a few hospitality and restaurant clients, and I love that space. It's just continuously exciting, but also there's a consistency to it that you can start to track when you work with them year over year. And there's a seasonality that it gets really comforting once you start to track that cycle. Really, the types of clients that I like to work with are the ones who are doing something different in their category. They don't just want to be, oh, we're kind of like XYZ with one key difference. They are carving their own niche in a category that does not exist. And all of my clients kind of have that in common, that there was not their product, their service, anything like it before they were there. And I find that extremely interesting, because the people that, again, I go back to, why does someone start their business? The reason they started that business, there is a vision that they have, a grander vision than just creating a business and making money from it. They want to do things differently. Anyone can start a business. I truly believe that. I don't think everyone can start a brand. And those are different things. So it's important to me that I want to work with people that are building a brand. Even if that's a single location, even if that is one product, it doesn't matter. They understand that what they are doing is different, it's unique. They want to lean into their uniqueness instead of, a sea of sameness. I want the one who is rising above the tide. I want the weirdo in the corner who's doing something totally different than everyone else at the party, like that's the person I want to talk to. Like,
Yeah.
I love pop culture. I love the status quo. I'm a very basic girly, but I love when people are doing something different. I pay attention to it. Other people pay attention to it. It makes you stop in your tracks and think, what, why didn't this exist before? Or what, what made you think that? Anything that gets me excited, I know I'm excited to do your marketing for you. You got to excite me. And that's also just comes across through the passion of the founder. People who don't know their business are not people I want to work with. I want them to know their business. I want them to understand their limits and their capabilities, where they fit in. Obviously, I help with a lot of brand positioning work and things like that, but I never want someone to come to me to fix their business. I want somebody who understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. Everything else we can do, but I can never tell you someone why they're doing their business. If they don't have a strong vision for it, then that's the one thing marketing, all the pretty copy and great videos out there in the world, they would be nothing if there was not a bigger mission or vision being tied to that.
Yeah, you can't really prop up a lack of conviction.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So I always say I like to work with visionaries. I guess it's like a catch-all for those people, but it's hard to quantify who these people are because they're just different. And I like that. The people who are different are the people I like to work with.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were talking about this and we were kind of trying to like come up with an answer that's in like a by labeling the business,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a great fit.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you there. But the more you talk about the type of owner or leadership that you want to work with, like that's a lot clearer, because I do
Mm-hmm.
think that those people
Mm-hmm.
kind of are better at, and they're getting better all the time at like self-selecting, like, hey, that you're describing me. Like, I know what I've got here. I know how impactful it is and how it's different, but I need like somebody to broadcast that.
Right. And Matt Goebel, who has been on this podcast, he's a great example of that. And we got introduced and it was like right away, we knew that it was a good fit. We don't speak the same language, but we speak the same tone, I guess, so we can learn the language, but we vibrate on the same frequency, I guess.
Yeah. So when you were talking about getting inside the mind of a client, I was thinking about the jokes that I can make about Matt. But jokes aside, I bet that probably went pretty well, because I mean, you're clearly a good communicator, and I think Matt's a good communicator also. Matt's really good at distilling things down to like, here's all that really matters in this moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we're wanting to try to do here is kind of put ourselves out there and hopefully not embarrass me a great deal. I'm okay. I'm open to be embarrassed a little bit, but yeah. So I wanted to see, you brought some type of exercise, or we're going to do some type of workshop where we're going to put each other on the spot here.
Yes.
And see how this goes. I want you to flex your muscles.
Perfect. So we're going to do an exercise. And the reason that we came up with this exercise together kind of was, I talk a lot about mindful marketing, and really what that is, other than it just sounds nice, is it's about authentic and empathetic marketing. And I think in order to be authentic, you have to be empathetic. You can't speak with authenticity if you don't know the people that you're talking to. And I find that a lot of clients, when they first come to me, again, it's not their fault. It's how marketing itself needs marketing. Marketing itself has gotten a bad rap, and it sounds even like just icky. You're like, oh, marketing, what are we going to do? We're going to put a Facebook ad out there. We're going to go cold email someone, neither of which are marketing, but I can't get into that. Like, it's just people don't think of themselves as consumers and as victims of marketing and users of marketing. So what I like to do, I like to always start with my clients with what I call consumer insight mapping. So it's a little exercise that we're going to do together today. And so basically, I'm going to prove to you, and I don't think you're a skeptic, Nick, but pretend you're a skeptic who doesn't believe in marketing for the moment. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions based on a recent purchase that you made. So Do you have anything you've purchased in the last week? It can be online, it can be in store. Online is helpful for these purposes, but it can be anything. Anything you've bought in the last week that we can use as an example.
We could do a book,
Okay.
or I went and got a haircut. Can you tell?
I sure can. Either of those work. So,
Let's do the book. I don't
Okay.
want to talk about my hair.
Yeah, I know you just don't want to seem so vain on this podcast, right? Okay, perfect. Let's start with the book. Okay, so you bought a book this week. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and each one of them is going to hopefully shape all the different parts of a marketing funnel that we need as a brand to reverse engineer what is the ultimate endpoint that's already happened at this point in the conversation, that you made a purchase. So what was the initial need? What was the initial problem or need that led you to consider making this purchase for this specific book? And you can share the book too.
It is 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And the need, I try to always have a book that I'm reading, and I was just about finished with the previous one, and someone, that was next in line.
Okay, perfect. So you're a consistent reader. It's something that maybe you have a list somewhere going. It's something you keep you keep a pulse on new books. You talk about books with people, so books are an interest of yours. Something consistent, and you're always trying to read a new one. So you're always trying to kind of keep up with that. So how did you first hear about this specific book?
Someone mentioned it in a post somewhere online. I do not remember where.
Okay, so someone mentioned it. At that point that they mentioned it, did you mark it down somewhere at the time they mentioned it? Okay, so you marked it down. I personally use Goodreads to track my to-read list, but everyone has their own to-read list, I'm sure, somewhere. So you marked it down at the time. You didn't save the post, but you marked down that book from a post that you read, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
I actually went to Amazon and added it to my list.
You added to your list on Amazon. Fantastic. Intent to purchase. We like it. So what caught your attention specifically about this book? Was there a benefit of it? Was it an author you knew? Did the cover look interesting? What was it about this particular book that caught your interest?
It was mentioned, this is coming back to me now. It was mentioned by another business owner. Let's see, how did this come about? There was another business owner who I saw a post that they made, and they were talking about the business coach that they were working with.
Okay.
And so when I was looking into that business coach, that book was on their profile.
Okay.
Like it was attached to them somehow.
Okay, so it was attached to the business coach. Is this separate from the post you saw, or this is the same post that you had seen?
Yeah, it was separate from the post. So the post sent me to this second person's profile where I saw the book.
And this person, did you already follow them, or this was the first time you were seeing them? Okay, so this is now basically kind of two impressions you've had of this book now at this point. Did you research or compare other similar books at the same time? Did you look at reviews? Did you price compare? Did you do any kind of comparison before you added this to your cart?
The only thing that I did was I mentioned it to Kelly, my wife.
Okay.
And she was familiar with it and said, yeah, this another person that we know has been either read it or been through the program. I'm not exactly sure, but has experience with it.
Okay. So if anyone's keeping track at home, we're now counting 3 impressions towards this purchase. Now we're starting to see a clearer picture of why you bought this book, perhaps. Did you engage with any content from the brand, or let's say the author, prior to making a purchase? Did you look at their blog, their website, any social media? Did you engage at all with their brand?
I did. I'm 90% sure that I did it before I clicked buy.
Okay.
But I was on the website. I went through, they have some materials on their website, resources available. So I kind of checked into their whole ecosystem.
Okay. And so by doing that kind of reinforced that you were already thinking about buying this book, but everything you saw on their website reinforced that this book would be valuable based on their existing content. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So how many times did you interact with the brand before making a purchase decision? Did you visited their website? you visited a profile of someone. Did you get any emails? Did you watch any videos?
I don't think so. I think when I went to the website, I probably read a couple of articles that they had,
Okay.
downloaded a resource, maybe a second resource. I don't remember exactly, but I got a couple of different pieces of material from them off of their website.
Okay. And everything you read reinforced this decision. This should be the next book I'm going to read. Okay, great.
Yep.
What factors contributed to building trust in the product? Did you read any reviews? Or was it really just that it came from sources you trust? You confirmed it with your wife who had also heard of it, which also gives you a little trust. Any outside third-party resources you used to validate that purchase?
No, I think it was kind of those two layers were, and then when I went to their website, just the information there were certain pieces of it that really resonated. That they're just the way that they're phrasing things that they said were things that I'm familiar with, and so that I think is kind of what pushed me over the top.
Okay, so a little confirmation bias. You saw some things that resonated with you that you've seen before, and it can.
So I knew they were right.
Yeah, you knew they were right. Exactly. So, what was the final factor that influenced your decision to click add to cart and purchase, and the day, the hour that you actually purchased it? Price? Did anything affect you there? Convenience?
Gosh, I went through the process that, like, it's so familiar. I don't really think about these steps.
That's the point, Nick. That's how Amazon has. We are sheep. We are just being led and strained to the cart.
Yeah. I mean, I think by the time I went to their website, I was already going to buy the book.
Right.
At that point, it just kind of escalated to really looking forward to it.
So you ultimately made that purchase on Amazon or through their website? On Amazon. Okay.
Yeah.
Was it an Amazon link from their website, or did you search for it separately on Amazon?
I searched for it separately. Yeah, I think the point where I decided, like, I'm going to get this book was probably between Kelly's mentioning her familiarity with it and the website. I don't remember which was first.
Okay. But both of those steps helped you ultimately make that purchase and think this is gonna be a solid next book to read. So can you describe the experience of the actual purchase process? Was it easy? Was it straightforward? Were there any obstacles from clicking add to cart to you got that confirmation email, it is on its way to you in 2 days?
Nope. It was pretty easy.
Easy peasy.
You know, Amazon.
One click, all your information stored. You want it tomorrow? You want to save boxes? We'll get it to you in a day. Yep. And then the last question. So how did you feel after making the purchase? Did you receive any follow-up communication from the brand? Did anything that's happened since you bought the book impact your perception of the book, the author, etc.?
I don't think I've gotten any communication from them. I'm sure that I've gotten communication from Amazon.
Oh, sure.
But none. I'm kind of numb to that.
Yeah.
The experience. I mean, with Amazon, the book's there in a day or two. I start reading it a day or two after that, and so far it's been a good experience. It's met the expectations that I had.
The expectations. So if you were to get an email from the author, not directly, but from the publishing group in about 2 weeks asking you to leave a good review, you would say you would do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So if they give me a prompt and a smooth path to a review, especially now that I'm doing a podcast, so like I have a new appreciation for reviews.
Seriously. Yeah. They look at them. They just got a whole free ad from this.
Yep. Yeah. So if they prompt me and make it a smooth path, I'm an easy person to give a review.
Okay, perfect. Well, so that was the end of that exercise. So basically, if we reverse engineer it, what I like is in the beginning, it was I bought a book this week. By the end of our conversation, we realized that there were much greater factors at play to you buying a book this week. You had to get outside validation to build that trust. You had to get it confirmed. I think we counted 4 times that you had some confirmation. Not that you weren't going to buy it, but each step in that process made you more and more likely to make that purchase. potentially even quicker than you would have. So that was moving you from the top of the funnel where you're great, I need a book. I read books all the time. I just finished a book. I need a book. That was where you were at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of that journey, this was the only book you were going to read next because you had to confirm 4 different times on 4 different channels by their own copy on their website, by the ease of use of them being sold directly through Amazon and leveraging a third-party platform that already exists. It was confirmed to you by an outside career coach that you liked what they had to say. You might have seen that on LinkedIn. And then fourth, it was confirmed to you by your own wife, someone in your sphere of influence who had been directly connected to or had heard of this book before. So that's 4 different impressions it took for you to ultimately make that purchase. So if I was a marketer, which I am, if I, was going to work with this, if this author was going to come to me and say, we're having trouble selling this book, or another author was to come to me and say, we're having trouble selling this book, I would use this as a great example of, is the process easy? Do we have a website or standalone content that is going to confirm the purchase and shape more of the brand story around this singular purchase, which is something, it's a book, it's not a repeat purchase, like unless they decide to write a series, this is a solo purchase for them. So how are they building up every step of the marketing process so that you were a pretty quick convert for them in less than a week, I would say. So I think it's just a really interesting exercise because everyone thinks that marketing is this, very rigorous dollars and cents. I have to see a sponsored ad on LinkedIn. And if I click on that now, I'm on their list. It is so much more subtle than that. Subtle, and I would say slightly insidious due to the Amazon of it all. And that marketing is everywhere. And I call it to my clients, I say it's like seeing the Matrix. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And now every purchase you make for the next week, you're probably going to in your mind be, why did I make this purchase? What did, all the steps all made it easier for you to be receptive to that purchase. If they had sent you an email the day after you were going to purchase with a 15% off discount, great. They would have gotten less for that purchase. So it just shows, I think people go straight to a discount and think that's what is ultimately going to get a conversion. No, I mean, you can buy things at full price. We do it all the time just by telling the right story and understanding who our end consumer is. And, they wrote this book for someone like you, someone who's interested in nonfiction, thought leadership, perspective pieces, someone who's in the industry or adjacent to certain industries, because obviously they're marketing in those industries, someone who's savvy enough to be able to use Amazon and has an account and can make those one-click purchases without thinking about it. You are their ideal customer, and they sold you. So I just find it to be a really interesting exercise because it always gives this light bulb moment, especially to my most skeptical of clients who think that they themselves can see through marketing and they're not a victim of it. We are all victims of it. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. So I think that one of the really interesting things that's kind of come to light as we talk through this to me is, and I remember this reaching this point. So, if I put the book on my list at some point, I'm probably going to get it. Like any book that goes on the list, I'm probably going to do it.
Yes.
But there was a place in this process, like after a couple of those touch points, and I'm sure that it sped up, like moving it to the top of the queue. But I remember for sure it becoming a book that I was 100% going to read.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't next, I was absolutely going to read it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's an extra box that gets checked for me, right? It's like I got a list of probablys. There's a shorter list of absolutelys.
Exactly. So you, in turn, were a qualified lead from them because you were saying, yes, I'm going to read you. And then the bumped up every touch point probably got you closer to that purchase point. You were already a pretty high intent, purchaser. You like to read books. Maybe the cost to entry isn't too high. You're going to read this book, and then every step in that process got you closer to ultimately making that purchase. And so that's, those are small purchases. Those are things that we purchase every day. There is a psychological reason behind every single thing that we purchase, and every website we click on, there is, and there's data, there's cookies and everything that tracks this, but I'm much more interested in the psychological reasons behind consumer behavior. And I think this is a really nice exercise to do with yourself, with other, if you work with clients, do this with your clients, because it really just shows that everyone is susceptible to marketing. And the more you understand that, even myself as a marketer susceptible to marketing, you realize it gets easier to execute. But I will say the caveat of that is I've also worked with founders that think I wouldn't do this, so everyone wouldn't do this. I think you always have to take yourself out and just know that just because you are a consumer who maybe you hate abandoned cart emails, and if you get an abandoned cart email now, I'm definitely not buying it, so we're never going to send an abandoned cart email. There, for every one customer that hates an abandoned cart email, there's 20 that love it. So you can't go off of your own whims and desires fully. But I think that using yourself and your team as case studies for the type of marketing that you like to receive and the way that you like to engage with the brand, I think that's a really great stepping stone to understanding how you want to use that for your own brand.
This has all been like very good for awareness. I think a lot of times you just described it. We get ourselves in trouble when we look at what we would do and what we would expect the audience to do as being like the same thing. Mm-hmm. And they're not. There are some things we can draw from, and there are others that we need to disregard. I feel like for me, in a lot of cases, I'm better off if I just completely throw what I would do out the window, because I'm not sure that I'm a good example of any of it.
Yeah, exactly. I am not my own ideal customer. And so, yeah, I know some people who hate podcast ads. I personally like them. It gives me like a way to I kind of just put it like when you have a commercial, just like you can zone out for a couple seconds and then zone back in when your podcast starts. Sometimes your hands aren't free and you can't skip them, so they're just going to be there. So, everyone, I think it's understanding all the different steps to something even as small as a monthly book purchase, a stick of gum, whatever you're buying, big or small, is intent that needs to happen. There is an initial need. You have to have baseline awareness of the brand or product. You have to have interest. You have to have consideration. You have to engage with the brand in some way. There has to be X amount of touch points. There needs to be trust. And then that key decision can happen. So there's a lot of steps that need to happen, and not all of them are tied to a marketing activity, and some are tied to many marketing activities, but that's how you kind of find that sweet spot that works for your brand, because you can't do everything. So you kind of got to weigh the things that are going to have the most value to you based on what your audience actually wants and what the behavior you're starting to see with your consumer. So that's why I think that marketing should be data-driven. Marketing should be empathetic. It should be customer-led. It should be vision-led. And that's kind of where my idea for mindful marketing all comes from.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds, from our conversations, it seems like you've got a pretty consistent, like a structure or a process that you like to take clients through to get you to the place that you need to be. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I start all of my new clients with what I call a brand insight, and I ask them a series of questions. It's about 30 to 40 questions. They spend an hour with me, and I dig into not just their business, but also them as a person. I don't get too personal with it, but it's important that I know, like I said earlier, like what makes them tick, what their ultimate motivation is. And I ask a lot of questions about their audience and who they perceive as their audience versus who their actual audience is. I ask for numbers, I ask for data. And those are all just the initial starting points that get us to even put together a proposal that makes sense. So I do not do cold proposals. I don't just say, great, tell me, give me a 5-minute pitch of your brand and I'll tell you exactly what you need. I can't promise that. And I don't like starting an engagement that way. So instead, I like to do the brand work at the top. It's part of any process that you do, any kind of work you do with Moonstone. We always start with it. Some clients have just done that as a standalone project, and it just gives them insight, which is why I just call it brand insight. So it can be standalone. But for me, every single client process starts with a lot of questions, a lot of deep diving in, and then we add in all the organization. There's, systems and processes we use to get them where they need to be. And we have 3 different programs that we can run based on what they're ultimately looking for. But I never just give a proposal off of, an introduction or something like that, because I would never assume to know what someone needs. And I don't want them to tell me what I need. I want to ask them a series of questions so we can dig into what they need. Because I'm not again, it's not my business, it's theirs, and I will care as much as if it's my business, but ultimately the motivations need to come from them. So I always say marketing is simple, not easy. It's definitely not easy, but there is like a rule to it. There are processes, there are systems that you can put in place that make it a little simpler to kind of see it more as, ones and zeros instead of just this abstract catch all for all these different tactics that you can do. Once you start to see that there's different channels, there's different approaches, there's different activities, you start to see that there's categories and it's a little simpler to understand. But I really try not to overwhelm my clients with these are the biggest, broadest things we can do. We start small, we build, we grow, we scale together. Every client wants a new website. There's usually 15 things we need to put in place before to get a new website. So it's just important for me that I level set with my clients from the beginning, and they're realistic about their expectations, because marketing is not going to fix a broken business. It never will. So that's never what I want to be brought on to do. But I'm more than happy to help grow and scale and market a business. But yeah, I definitely never want anyone to think that marketing is a quick fix, because it's definitely, when done right, it is anything but.
I'm really enjoy listening to like a craftsman talk about the craft. It's not an accident that this is what you're doing. Hearing you talk about some of these things, like, from the beginning of our conversation, you're talking about your curiosity being a thing. Like, you always ask a lot of questions, and then like that's kind of the central piece of you being really good at what you do, right? Like, your strength is what puts you in a place to be able to understand the client's brand well enough to then like capture their voice. And it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, the biggest compliment I can get when a client is I've had clients be like, "Did I write this or did you write this?" And it's such a compliment to me, because I'm
That's
like,
so
I'm
cool.
in your head, aren't I? I'm living in there. And it's just nice, because I know, as a business owner, I know how hard it is to relinquish control over something as specific as your messaging or your visual identity. I mean, these are very, very personal things to a business owner, so I don't take it lightly. My team doesn't take it lightly. And so to me, it's such a compliment when clients feel like they can trust us as their mouthpiece out to the public. I mean, that's, again, it's not something I take lightly. Marketing is an extremely important part of your business. And it should be looked at as that. And I treat it like that. And, the clients that I've been lucky enough to work with also treat it that way.
Are you only doing work that involves strategy? I know you're doing like some fractional CMO work, right?
Yes. So we'll work in like projects. We'll do one-off projects for clients that maybe require a little less strategy work. No matter what, we always start with the brand insight. So even if you're just looking for, we had done just a welcome email drip series for a client as a one-off project. Is a woman I had met at a networking event. That's all she wanted, all she really had the budget for. But I still found a way to work in the brand insight, because any messaging we put out there, especially something that's important, it's like your welcome series, has to come back to your larger brand and your larger desire and who your audience is. So the short answer is there's strategy work in everything we do. Like, there's nothing we do that does not require some level of strategy work. But I don't only work with clients on a monthly retainer. We'll work with clients one-off. We'll do projects. We could do an 8-week engagement. I had the idea when I first started Moonstone that my Half Moon program, which is basically an abridged franchise training of sorts, was going to be my biggest hit, and that my 2 ancillary programs were going to be just kind of one-offs. And of course, everyone has gravitated towards Full Moon. That is my full service agency retainer program. Also, depending on hours, that's where we fit in fractional CMO work. So I was wrong, but I still think there's a niche, and I still think there are founders out there who want to learn what they're doing and do it themselves. So if you're out there, if you're listening to this, we do have a program for that as well. That isn't, kind of that monthly ongoing retainer. It's learn how to do it yourself, use us as a resource for 8 weeks, and get yourself all the training you need on the categories you need, and then it's self-service from there. So my goal is to work with founders of different stages that want to learn in different ways and want to engage with marketing in different ways. Not every brand has the budget to bring on a fractional CMO or bring on a full-time marketing consultant. So there's ways to work with us that are as well.
Do they need to have their own marketing resources in place, or are you like an entire outsourced marketing department?
So basically, we're an entire outsourced marketing department. We do content creation, we do strategy work, we do all graphic design, and can also work with third-party partners. So if we're doing a photo shoot or a video shoot, we can be on site, we can be managing that. So we manage third-party vendors for most of our clients as well. So we don't do digital marketing, but if we work with a digital marketing agency, we're kind of managing them. So we don't need an existing marketing resource in-house, and honestly it works almost better for us if we don't. The one big thing is we need some sort of brand assets. We need you to already have a logo, we need you to already have a name, we need you to already have some kind of baseline brand materials, but again, we can kind of start from there and build up. So we've had clients that are just starting, and really like we're like starting their Instagram for them and launching their whole go-to-market strategy. And then we've had other brands that have, they're going public, they're looking for, just that growth to take them to the next stage, or they just finally have marketing budget and they don't know where to spend it. So, it really depends. We'll work with different brands at different sizes and different levels. So like where you are in your business and how sophisticated your marketing team is, it doesn't really impact us too much.
Okay. Well, this is fantastic.
Good. I hope this was helpful.
You're great. Thank you so much for listening. If you found the show valuable, you can say thanks and show your support simply by taking a quick second to like, share, and comment on the show. You can also find more information about each of my guests, all of the resources from the show, and myself at nickberry.info/TBOJ.